Hey Jessica, how you doing? Okay, so I want to address this question. For this design, I used a modular grid, although I do have although I do have a question. Does there have to be a certain amount of columns and rows for a specific design? For instance, how many columns and rows would it create a unified grid for this poster grid? Well, first of all, any grid is better than no grid. What grid does is it ensures alignment and it ensures equal distribution of visual elements. Basically, it creates a mathematical correctness, which translates itself to harmony in a composition. So the number of rows and columns is really strictly dependent on how much information there is and how densely you want to pack that information. But really, it's how much information do you have and how do you want to present it. So there is no formula for saying, okay, this size document needs this amount of columns, this amount of grids. Typically when I design, and I always design my grid first before any design project, I will not start a design project without a grid first. And I think most professional designers would agree with me. The first time I lay a grid or I lay a grid out on a predefined size, document size, there's no guarantee that that grid is going to work. Can it be more optimal? Yes, absolutely. So what I'll typically do is I'll start my grid and I'll start placing elements and I'll look at it and I'm gonna say, is this working or is it not? If it's not working, I have to look at why. And if the design elements are not evenly distributed, or if there's a better way to distribute the visual weight associated with any composition, I will change the grid. Okay, so to answer your question, it's all a matter of practice and really getting used to using the grid. Then you can start really deciphering little areas where you maybe need more columns, more rows, or less columns and less rows. My recommendation is to use an odd number of columns and rows, though I will give you that because that will pretty much ensure against center aligned alignment, which we don't want to. We at this point in our design careers, we want to kind of try to stay away from center alignment. That's not to say that you can't use center alignment in your design work when you become a professional designer. It's just to say it's best practice right now to stay away from center alignment. A lot of students default to center alignment, and it's not the best practice. So my advice to students is just try to stay away from center alignment for now. Okay, now let's take a look at composition, and I've got it up right here. And design in everyday life and your blanket, right? It just simply feels comfortable. So it's the blanket. And I'm a blanket guy too, so I can totally relate to this. So let's go through the list of requirements, and then we'll take a look at the composition and the typography. How does that sound? I just want you to know I'm going through this little hit list of bullet points that I have, and this is compiled directly from this page right here, week 4, assignment 4, part 1, and then specifically the introductory paragraph, the information located in the instructions, the objectives, and the design requirements. Okay, so let's get started. All right, first of all, the object must be dominant. So the object is the blanket, right? The blanket is not the dominant object here. Now, one really cool thing, now, I wouldn't recommend using a gray blanket. I think we can add more visual interest with color. So maybe a red blanket. And what I would do is I would try to find an image of a blanket that's like sprawled out, you know what I'm saying? And maybe just like spread that blanket out right through here instead of this little tiny folded up blanket, which is not the most engaging image, you have to admit. So maybe like a nice spread out blanket or like, sort of cascading like this down the side of the composition or something like that. But the object has to be the dominant portion of the composition. Right now, the object is a blanket. It is not the dominant portion. Object must be shown with somebody using it or interacting with it. That's the dominant image, okay? And that's a great image of someone interacting with it, absolutely. So theoretically, what you could do is you could go into Photoshop, and when you find an image of a red blanket that you can cascade along the side or place it however, then if you can't find an image with a red blanket, you don't have to. You can use a different blanket, but you could also go into Photoshop and select the blanket out and change the color to match the color in the main image. But this is an image of somebody interacting with it. That's excellent. Must show an image of which is the result of using the object. Now, how do we show the result of using a blanket? That's a tough one for me. Boy, that's a tough one. So you got to think of a way to show an image of somebody result of using the object. Must show at least 2 components. It's a blanket, so I'm going to consider these to be components. the fabric and the actual yarn itself, right? Um, must include the headline, design in everyday life, must include a paragraph of body copy, must include captions. I'll talk about those captions in a second. White background only, asymmetrical design only, okay? This is symmetry. This is pure symmetry. You can take this, bisect it right down the middle, and it's going to fold over on each other. So this is symmetry. We want asymmetric um, design layouts here. There's examples in the course announcements. Again, I'll go through that in a second. Your image must come in contact with the page in at least 2 areas. You do down here, so that's good. Design must combine images that are on boxes as part of a background and cropped images. So this is a cropped images. These are part of a background, so you've got that covered. Then do not put everything in a box. Full color, keep your image dominant, and you must use a grid. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at the composition itself. As I said, the first thing we see is this center alignment. So this is definitely symmetrical. Now, do I need a grid if I plan on center aligning? Absolutely not. And that's another reason why I'm recommending students stay away from center alignment, so you can practice with the grid. You don't need a grid if you're going to center align. All you do is center everything on the page, right? You've got 2 images, center them, span them equal, and call it a day. Everything else is center aligned. Don't even need a grid, right? So that's another indication that for the best practice at this point is to use a grid and stay away from center alignment. Okay, design in everyday life looks pretty good, but that looks like there's some kerning. The space between these 2 curved letter forms. Remember what we said about that? 2 curved letter forms needs to be closest. So we got some areas here that are in need of kerning. I think this is pretty good. Body copy itself, I'm going to zoom into that. But before I do, I want to talk about hierarchy. So hierarchy indicates that the headline is taking first position in hierarchy, right? Then the subhead, which it should be, right? The subhead, and I might even consider placing this subhead closer to the headline to group those, then go into your body copy. But then we fall apart a little bit in terms of hierarchy because the body copy is just too small for the composition. We can see this little tiny area, and then we've got this big composition. That type is too small. It would force the viewer to either pull it closer or zoom in electronically. You don't want that in a small poster like this, right? So that body copy, I think, is too small. Then we have, again, it's compromised hierarchy because the captions are larger than the body copy. It should be the other way around. The largest type in this particular layout largest type should be headline, followed by the subhead, followed by body copy, followed by captions. Okay? So you can't really make these captions. You can make them a little bit smaller, but I would increase the size of the body copy just to kind of reinforce that typographic hierarchy. Okay, I'm going to zoom in here and we're going to take a look at the paragraph. Okay. In a type selection this short, I do not recommend hyphens. I would turn your hyphens off. You don't want to include hyphens in this tiny little paragraph. The winner. Yeah, is that two spaces after that? Or is that one? It's hard to say. It is really difficult to see. It might be just make sure there's only one space after your periods. Should that be an exclamation point? I love winter. Or even I love winter, then an M dash, not because of. There's a little change in. But I don't think that a period. I think it would be either an exclamation point or an M dash, and then use a small lowercase n just to continue that thought. Rags are looking pretty good here, but you definitely want to review the tutorial on rags so that you can apply that to your final project for the year, which we're going to assign next week for the year. The final project for the term, which we're going to assign during week 5. Now, suffice to say that all of the demonstrations, tutorials, etc., that are located in the course announcement this week are all fair game for grading for the rest of the term. Okay, so if we go to those announcements, we can see that there's 4 announcements here, and there's a ton of material in here. Welcome to week 4, how to justify, how to adjust your regs, how to complete assignment 4. Within these, there's also other additional videos and tutorials. So you want to definitely get very intimate with the information in these 4 announcements. Okay, one of the things I do in this particular announcement, this one right here, this how to complete assignment 4, is I go through this ad right here, and this is in the announcements from the Welcome to Week 4, but I go through this ad and I really deconstruct it, and I describe why it's done so well in terms of incorporating type with image. I think there's a lot of things that we can do here to reinforce this. Now, if we take a look at this composition now, is this a really super inviting and compelling composition? And I just don't know. I'm just not dying to jump in here and read through this, okay? And I don't mean to sound discouraging at all, but let's take a look at this, and then let's take a look at something like this piece right here. This is gorgeous. Typographic composition for the title area. You could try to incorporate something like that into yours. The use of color, the use of shape, the use of this really interesting layout, and pulling items from the actual image to use in the layout. It's all explained and described in that video, so you definitely want to take a look at that. Okay, the good news is your typography is looking pretty good, but I think that we can definitely make this a much more compelling piece. So let's go ahead and try some of those techniques for your final submission coming up Sunday. And between now and then, if you want to run anything by me, please let me know, and I'll be glad to make any additional comments. And of course, if you have any questions at all, let's get those squared away quickly. Okay, fantastic start. Questions, comments, concerns, clarifications, I'm right here. Just let me know. Thank you very much.